Living green or sustainably is about more than saving on your electric bill and doing your part to protect natural resources. It is about a safer and healthier life for you and your family without sacrificing style, quality, or budget. This is a movement to provide all of us with clean air to breathe and water to drink, safe, healthy food to eat, and places to live, and energy to run the places where we live, learn, play, and work. The Everyday Green Home Podcast helps you get the value of green for you, your family, and your community. Whether it's green homes, green living, or the people who make it happen, join me, Marla Esser Close, to learn how green and sustainability practices and products work for you and our world. Unintended consequences. Wow, there's a humongous topic, and especially when you start thinking of it in terms of environment, climate change, how we live, our day-to-day lives, there's a lot to think about. Oh, that makes my head spin. Hey, y'all. This is Marla, the Green Home Coach, and today, you guessed it, we're going to talk about unintended consequences with my very favorite co-host.
I'm really your only co-host right now, aren't I? Wow.
Well, you're my favorite, too.
Well, you're my favorite.
Thanks. So today's exciting. We don't typically timestamp our podcast, but today I'm going to. It is in June of 2021, and the reason it is so exciting is because we are where?
We are live in studio at Shock City Studios in beautiful St. Louis, Missouri.
For the first time in
almost 2 years.
Yeah. This is a huge treat. Sam Mall, our sound engineer and make us sound wonderful and have a fun day, is here waving to us in the studio.
Sound engineer extraordinaire.
Extraordinaire.
Part of the show.
And so unintended consequences with everything. That was an unintended consequence of
getting to see Sam again.
And illness and everything else. We couldn't be in studio. Very grateful for all the electronic and online tools we have, but there's nothing quite like this magic.
No, I mean, we do what we can on Zoom and all that, but while I get to see you through the video camera when we record, it's different being 2 feet from you. It really is. And especially with this topic, unintended consequences. I mean, this goes so far reaching. I mean, whether it's butterfly effect, theory,
oh my gosh, yeah,
or something as simple as spilling water, like we just had pre-production.
We had a little mishap coming in.
But it was an unintended consequence of a simple ask of a favor. So you just never know what your thought is, what your action is, what the unintended consequence is of that action.
And today we really want to talk about this in terms of all this conversation about climate change and all the different impacts of it. And this is, as you and I have talked so many times, this is a big topic. There is not one part of this. There's not 100 parts of this. There's many more than any of us can comprehend at one time, I think.
Well, and they're so ingrained and so spread out that we don't really understand the full effect. We hear the talking point, but we don't see the granular details that go into that talking point.
So let's kind of lay some parameters here so we can have a conversation that's meaningful and not so many things to consider that we don't make any sense.
Oh, you really want to shape the discussion?
Well, nothing ever gets shaped with you and I involved. So no, we're not going to go there. But what we really want to bring to bear and what we want to have a conversation about today, so mighty listener, keep this in mind, is how we all need to think about what we do, at least a little bit, because of the fact that there's always going to be some other effect, some other consequence of any of our actions. So far, so good?
Well, what did we learn when we were younger? For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction.
Simple law of physics.
You got it.
So what's happening and what we're seeing right now is so many times people leaping to a conclusion that a certain solution is the solution. And I will posit that there is no such thing as the solution for anything.
No silver bullet.
There is
nope.
one of many solutions. And I posit, as do many other people out there, that it's going to take many solutions to improve our health, our safety, our comfort, and our dependence upon this place we live, this place, the earth, the world, whatever you want to call it. But we have to look at things a little bit more
systemic.
Yeah, systemic is a good way to put it. And this law of physics, this unintended consequences, so many times we find things that are happening that we're not thinking past the next step.
Well, what I find funny is the laws of physics, laws of gravity, laws of mathematics, these aren't suspended just because of a catchy phrase or a trending meme. They still exist. And while something might sound good to people, doesn't mean it's the right move or doesn't have any consequences with that action.
Right. So let's get specific and put a couple examples on the table.
Perfect.
It's a lot easier for me to understand all this when I have a story or an example I can see in my head. One in particular you were talking about that I really like is this whole practice of introducing some biological organism, be it a plant or an animal, into an ecosystem in which it's not normally found to control some other thing getting out of balance. Now, number one, we're treating the symptom here,
right?
Something getting out of balance, without looking at what caused that out of balance. So therein lies one challenge. So you were talking about the trade-off story.
Yeah. So, when I was studying environmental management and sustainability, we would talk about biodiversity. And there are a lot of programs out there through departments of conservation, through departments of natural resources, among the different states, where what they do is they trade certain species to, see if they can exist in different environments.
For what purpose?
Well, one, to do research.
Okay.
And two, to try and increase biodiversity.
Okay.
So, it's a noble cause.
I get it.
Right?
But there's a reason things are indigenous in certain areas.
That is true. But it's
Y'all see where this is going, right?
It's a noble cause. They try something. Well, our beautiful state of Missouri was involved with another state. We don't really need to go into the details of it, but it was a trade. We gave them white-tailed deer. Why deer? Because deer's everywhere in Missouri.
Yeah, because they have no predators left.
No predators. They're everywhere in the county. We're talking in the suburbs.
So this was a way to handle the overpopulation of deer, is to ship them to another location.
We tried to put them in another location. The state...
I'm so sorry I'm laughing. Actually, I'm not.
The state, in return, gave us armadillos, which are not native to Missouri.
And all this time I thought that they had just migrated up here with the warmer weather.
Everybody thinks that. Everybody thinks, this is a result of climate change. This was not. This was planned. Somebody said, hey, it'd be a good idea we give away deer. We get some armadillos to see if they can survive in Missouri.
Why couldn't they migrate up here?
Short legs. This is
speaking to the woman with a 28-inch inseam.
Still taller than an armadillo last time I checked. Okay. We're not saying that they can't get here.
I just had
naturally.
This visual image.
But this is like over 10 years.
Of this little armadillo beach.
That's a lot of room to walk.
It is a lot of place to walk.
That's a lot of place to walk here.
It could be like the butterflies, where different generations that complete the migrations.
Right. Generations.
So we don't have generations.
We have 10 years. 10 years is my gosh. 10, 15 years kind of thing.
Y'all do see the humor in this, right?
So Missouri now has an armadillo population.
Yeah, they're all over the side of the road.
They're all over the side of the road because as they walk out into the street, Sam, do you happen to know what the natural defense reaction of an armadillo is when they are cornered? No.
I had to look it up.
They jump. They jump straight up in the air.
People, I looked it up. I had no clue, and I've grown up with armadillos almost all my life.
They jump straight up in the air between 4 and 6 feet.
And guess where that is?
Is right in the path of the moving car's windshield.
Oh, my gosh. So next time y'all see that armadillo on the side of the road, somebody intentionally created this issue.
Yes, they did.
With unintended consequences.
This was the unintended consequence of what was supposed to be a noble experiment of introducing biodiversity into two different ecosystems.
So on a more serious note, if that's possible, it is possible. Introducing an endangered species back into an area plays much in this same set of circumstances. Reintroducing the wolves back into big areas where there was a lot of ranching. And now
bald eagles in the Alton, Illinois area.
Yeah.
That is one of their favorite migratory spots where they can breed.
And so what is the unintended consequence of that then?
A lot of extra tourism.
So this is a good point. Sometimes unintended consequences are good.
Yeah, they're not necessarily all bad.
Sometimes they're problematic, but oftentimes it may be problematic to one group and not to another. So this whole idea of unintended consequences or trade-offs, if you start looking at every situation from this lens, I think it gives you the opportunity to have some grace by putting yourself in someone else's shoes or something else's shoes and seeing from the other side or seeing from what possibly could occur or that poor armadillo's side. And that's just not going to leave my mind right now. But it's so many of our solutions to things are short-term solutions.
Well, they are. And especially since we live in an environment where it's all about my way or the highway.
Yeah.
There's no discussion. There's no compromise. There's no debate. It just becomes this is the only outcome I will accept, which tells me that they really don't understand the unintended consequences of what the proposal is.
Right.
Because if you fully understood all the unintended consequences of what the proposal is, then you would understand that, if this is the only way, then that might happen. And while there's no guarantee that if X happens, or if X is the proposal and Y happens, while Y is no guarantee, Y is a risk.
Right.
And that risk needs to be understood, whether it's a positive or negative risk.
And sometimes we don't learn the risks right away, but we do need to be prepared to deal with those possible consequences.
Absolutely.
So I want to stick on the environmental side here for a little bit. And then, folks, we are going to switch this to looking at some of our environment, our built environment that we create in a little bit later here. So stay tuned. But on the biology side, you see so many situations where we've brought in one species to control another species that is out of control. We were talking about the Asian carp being brought over into one of the Great Lakes. I can't remember which one. I think Lake Michigan.
Yeah, the whole invasive species.
The mussels, the honeysuckle, the pear trees, all of these were brought in to solve a short-term problem and now have blossomed.
No pun intended.
Out of control. So now we are dealing with that unintended consequence of that artificially introduced species now being the one we're having to control. So be careful what you introduce. And I see this even in our garden and in our yard and our neighborhoods. Everybody bringing in species that don't do well in the Oklahoma heat or the clay of the soil and forcing things to perform.
Well, and isn't that one of the reasons why when you're dealing with certified green-built homes, the idea is use native plants for your landscaping? Because if you don't, you are basically saying, I need a whole lot of extra resources just to keep these things alive.
Right. So in order to keep something alive that was not intended to be in that environment, you need extra water, extra fertilizer, extra work, probably extra money and time, because those seem to always come up in the equation. So there's just a very simple story about unintended consequences with one simple biology, a plant. So you get to think about all that. And if you think down the road, you always hear my story on lawns. I think lawns, and I have a lawn, folks. My HOA requires me to have a front lawn, and we haven't quite figured out what to do with the back lawn. But less and less of it is yard every year. The grass is kind of silly. We pay money to put down grass, probably to improve the soil, to water it, which takes resources, money, and time. And then we mow it down with something that creates pollution, noise pollution, and takes more money and fuel be it electric or, gasoline powered. And then we start the whole process over again. Every week. And I think the only people getting rich off of this are the people that make the fertilizers, the pesticides, process the water, and mow the lawns.
Well, gas.
And gasoline. Yeah. So there you go.
Well, great example. My friends that live in Phoenix, well, you don't really have lawns in Phoenix.
But you used to.
They have a small patch of grass in the front of the house, which might be as big as the table on this island.
Which is about 4 by 8.
Yeah, if that. That's their lawn. Everything else is sculpted rock. Or in the backyard, it's a massive patio, concrete patio, pool deck, the swimming pool, and AstroTurf.
Okay, so we're going to breathe here, but I'm going to leave you with one unintended consequence to think about before we take a quick breather. Now that they have put down hardscape, concrete, probably, now we have the unintended consequence of what little rain they do get runs off.
Yep.
Ta-da. You probably don't have the time, resources, or know-how to research and shop for better options for you and your world. That's why I've done it for you. The Everyday Green Home Shop is my curated collection of better products for a safer, healthier, more comfortable life in your home. Through simple buying choices, you can change your home easily. My book laid out the how to do it. Now, the Everyday Green Home Shop gives you a place to put those ideas into action with your buying choices. I invite you to look through the online shop and choose an item or two to swap for something you usually buy for your home. Once you make a selection, it will take you to one of my trusted affiliate sites or the Amazon site you already use. Super easy. Products on Everyday Green Home range from indoor-outdoor rugs made from recycled plastic to my husband's favorite reusable silicone straw that fits in his pocket. I look for third-party independent green labels or go through a trusted third-party verification process to validate the products I curate for you. Go to everydaygreenhome.com for what you need to create a stylish, safer, and healthier home easily. So, okay, we're talking about the plants, the animals, then the lawn. So let's get on into the house.
Okay.
Because there's a whole bunch of unintended consequences with our homes.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
Decades worth.
So building science is the science of understanding all the different laws of nature, physics, et cetera, that apply to the built environment.
Correct.
And the built environment is anything that we as human beings put together to protect ourselves from rain, wind, heat, cold, the elements. Are we okay? I mean, that's my definition, but are we okay accepting that definition?
I would absolutely accept that because when you think about building science, air flows just like it does everywhere else in the world of physics, wet to dry and hot to cold.
So with that in mind, everything we do to protect ourselves from the elements is going to have a trade-off.
Yes.
We cut down a tree to be our wood lumber. Then we've had a consequence of that tree no longer existing to pull carbon out of the air into the ground, provide beauty, provide cover for animals, whatever else. I mean, trees can do a number of things. So trade-offs.
Yes.
So this whole idea of building science is to minimize or at least control, and I say that with air quotes, the trade-offs as much as you can. And nothing's absolute. I mean, there is no such thing.
Whether it's using alternative methods and alternative materials, you talk about you need trees for lumber.
Right.
You need lumber for framing. Okay, great. Trade-off. One, you either have sustainable forestry instead of chopping down old growth trees. Well, now instead of maybe 2x4s, you have engineered joists.
Yep.
So that's a trade-off where you're not basically needing a 50-year-old tree to make dimensional lumber. You can take smaller tree that you've harvested over a couple years and you've replaced, or you can take scrap and make it into something.
Side note, y'all, go find our toilet paper podcast from a few months ago because we get into a lot of discussion about trees and wood pulp.
Yes, we do.
And a lot of unintended consequences there.
There's a lot coming out on that one.
Yeah. So this whole idea of building science says, let's look at this from a systems perspective and minimize the side effects, the things that you don't want to happen as much as possible.
as much as possible, yes.
Right.
You're still going to need some wood, so you need some trees. Even if you're doing an ICF home, an insulated concrete form house, you're building the walls out of concrete. That's the exterior walls. You still need lumber on the inside.
Actually,
yes,
don't need as much.
You don't need as much, but you still need some. Or you could do steel
framing, but that's got its own trade-offs.
Oh, that's got a whole lot of trade-offs.
Yeah, it's got a whole lot of trade-offs. So why do we care about all this? And what really started all this, and we were talking about this offline, is, okay, so when I was a little girl, I loved reading Little House on the Prairie books, right? And there was one particular incident I remember in there when the family was building their first city house, quote unquote. And Pa went to the store and got those single panes of glass for the precious windows because everything they'd built before was log cabin or sod cabin, and it was a hole with shutters. So now they were going to have light and not let the wind blow in. Absolutely cool. But now you compare that to what we have today.
Oh, yeah, like triple pane with argon in between.
Engineered, and for good reason, because panes of glass don't protect you from the heat and cold very much. They do keep out the rain and the snow, though. So things have changed. And building science has been what has helped us understand those changes and how to make things better. But we were talking earlier about how the energy crisis back in the 70s really was kind of what got so many people interested in building science and how to do homes better. And I say do homes better intentionally because it wasn't just how we built them. It was how we lived in them and how we created them. Yeah.
Well, and that, we talked about how a lot of decisions are short-term decisions.
And this is case in point.
Case in point, early 70s energy crisis. The lines trying to get gasoline for the cars. You're every other day you can queue up and you can
Thank goodness I lived in Oklahoma then.
You can get only so many gallons of gas a day. I mean, it was crazy. So what was the knee-jerk reaction was to look at everything that used energy, including homes. Now, a lot of homes back then used heating oil.
Right.
Well, it's the same material. They make a different derivative. Instead of heating oil, it's gasoline for the internal combustion engine.
Right. But it all comes from crude oil.
All came out of the same original product. So we got to find ways to save oil. How do we do that? Well, you know what? Let's seal up homes.
So we use less energy.
We use less energy. Let's make them tighter. Great idea. Let's do that. Well, the problem was these homes were not designed to be tight.
We shrink wrapped them. That's almost what it was like in some cases.
They were not designed to be tight. They were not thought out to be tight. And because of that, we didn't really think so much about what was inside the house. We just knew it had to use less energy. So here we are in the 70s. We go in, we seal up these houses. Yes, they use less energy. But about a decade later, 15 years later, all of a sudden, we have a generation of kids. Highest concentration of asthma cases we have ever seen. Why? Because that was a direct result of sealing up these houses and then letting these children grow up in these untested environments.
Letting them breathe?
Letting them breathe the air. We had no idea, but yet here we are.
Well, the other thing that happened from those homes, many of those homes had horrible, horrible mold issues.
Oh, yeah, that's another one.
And I'm super sensitive to mold. I can't imagine somebody with asthma. But so when they wrapped these houses more airtight, oftentimes they were using things that did not have any airflow. And materials in a home need to, especially on the exterior, need to dry out.
Yeah, they weren't permeable.
They weren't permeable. So you can have something that does not let liquid water through, but will let vapor through. And that vapor is needed to dry things out. So these homes would never dry out. And they would literally get moisture trapped in the walls from the way they were sealing these homes up. So not only did we not have any fresh air coming in the home, now we've got moisture buildup and mold blooms in homes. And as you can imagine, this is not a healthy way to live.
And this is basically the stories of every time you hear somebody opens up a wall to remodel and they have black mold behind it. This is why they have it.
This is why.
This is exactly why.
Right. And interestingly enough, Yeah, if I were to buy a home from the 70s or 80s now, that would definitely be one I would want to do pretty much a gut renovate.
Oh, yes.
And they may have delightful character and delightful layout and, use those structures to your advantage. But if you're in a home from this generation, please, please, please have an energy and or health assessment done to make sure that you can have a healthy experience in that home. And there are definitely ways that we can improve that a lot. So that's very important. And, you were talking even about the weatherization programs and how we had some similar issues.
So back in early 2010s, right after the Great Recession, there were a lot of organizations that went into especially more impoverished areas. And the idea was cost of energy was increasing and we wanted to find ways to save money. So it was charitable acts. Acts definitely meant to do good. Mm-hmm. And what they did, they went in and they weatherized these homes so they would use less energy in the wintertime. The problem was all of these homes were 50, 60, 70, sometimes 100 years old. In many urban areas, especially in the North, Midwest, and East Coast, those areas are very old construction.
And some of the old construction's good.
Yeah.
But some of it's not.
We're not talking, the bones of the house. The bones are great. The problem is these houses are made to breathe because that was the air circulation.
Well, especially for coal-fueled homes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So now by sealing them in, once again, we weren't thinking about what was in these homes, which had a lot of PVC in them. You had a whole lot of materials that were off-gassing in these homes, and it led to deteriorating health for a lot of people.
So there's so many unintended consequences with homes, and we've seen over the past few years a definite increase in understanding of the general home buying and home owning and home living public that what's in their living environment does affect the health of the people living there. Well, along comes the pandemic, and all of a sudden, what's in our air, what's on surfaces, all of this becomes very, very front and center. Well, now that's kind of smashed into this whole idea of health, wellness, comfort in a home. And we're seeing many more people look for these kind of features, ask about these kind of features. What are the things in this home that are going to contribute to my family's health and wellness? Now, the home buying, home owning, home dwelling public has gotten a lot smarter, yet understanding the basics of building science is still, a little more studied than I think the average home person has had the chance to dive in.
And I think part of that is, yes, we got smarter because we were forced to get smarter.
True.
We were made to do nothing but spend time in our homes for months on end. Say what you want. Yeah, the unintended consequence of being forced in there was you got really tight with your family and your closest friends.
Tight in, a whole new way.
You got it. But at least you also learned the consequences of being stuck inside that house.
And it's made us want new, different things in our homes.
Yes.
This is why home remodeling right now is just off the charts.
Through the roof.
Yeah. And even the builders building new homes, they are pivoting to include home offices and workout spaces and private spaces as well as gathering spaces in these homes. And we're seeing a lot of these builders make changes as this information is becoming.
Yeah, two of the cooler features I'm seeing in some of the homes are a Zoom room.
Yeah,
so they can do video conferencing.
With a nice wall behind them.
Yes. And also we're seeing Amazon drop-offs or online delivery drop-off areas.
Love that idea. And yeah, I want to figure out a good way to help retrofit homes with that. Besides, I keep thinking of the big boxes we used to have on the dock. Mm-hmm. They had a lockbox in them. You just put a combination on there. But yeah, it is. People are thinking differently. And there's a lot of things that I believe, as do a lot of people, that will stick around. Things that we learned that we can do. So I'm hoping we'll get the best of both worlds and not too much of the unintended consequences. But yeah, be prepared, folks, because they always pop up, those unintended consequences.
And they don't always pop up right away.
No, and they don't always pop up in the way you think they will either.
No. So
you think you're going to get a certain reaction, but no.
The question's going to be what pops up in 5 to 10 years that we go, oh, this is from the pandemic.
Right. Yeah, now there's you could do a pool on that, right?
Oh. I don't even think I want to go there.
Okay, so I was trying to think of what would I think would be the biggest unintended consequence. Well, I can tell. Okay, so when we were looking for homes in Oklahoma City, since I can't believe it's been almost 5 years since I moved. I know, it's weird. But when we were looking for homes, we had a list of about 14 things that we wanted in a home.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Maybe a dozen. I think we saw 14 homes. But anyway, we had this list. And there were 3 things that we would look for on the outside first and then decide if we even wanted to go inside. Well, so we end up really liking this home that was about 10 or 12 years old. It was in a really great neighborhood. We really liked the layout. And we had the home inspection, and it had some problems. And termites, water problems. That scared me. So we passed on the house, and we went with our second choice, which was a brand new home. We thought, great. We don't have a lot of work to do because my husband, Scott, was just going through his first round of medical treatments, and that way he wasn't going to have a lot to do, but it was radiation. So we thought, hey, yay, we're done. And he wanted a big yard. Y'all are getting ready for this, right? Well, he has more medical treatments, and now we have a big yard.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely an unintended consequence. So they come in all forms, all shapes and sizes. I do try to look for the silver linings, though.
Which is that?
Well, we have this really great wildflower garden.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Like I said, not every unintended consequence is a bad one or it's a horrendous one. Yours is you had a big lawn and you get to mow it.
Yeah, right. But it is our little piece, so we'll be grateful for that. So think about the unintended consequences in your life. We are loving these more climate change-oriented conversations because we want you to have a chance to think. I think Tony and I both feel very strongly that that's something we all need to make sure we allow time for.
Well, not just to think, but to discuss, to have conversations. Today, it's a lost art. Listening and having a conversation about higher impactful topics is almost unheard of today. And I think we as a society lose a lot because of that. So if we can get back to having conversations, a lot of what we see in the media will go away.
So there's your to-do, folks, your homework. Go have a conversation, preferably with somebody you don't normally have a conversation with. And I bet you if you listen a little bit, you'll find all kinds of things to talk about. So until next time, we're signing off. That wraps this episode of the Everyday Green Home Podcast. Get the show notes with all the resources mentioned in this episode. And be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app so you never miss an episode. Ready to get started? Get more information, how-tos, and resources in my private Facebook group, Love Your Everyday Green Home. See you there. And remember that living a little better and a little greener is easier than you think.